Kingdoms rise and empires crumble, and the knowledge and wisdom from past ages are lost to the foggy ruins of time. But for genuine seekers of truth, one place stands alone on a hill, shining brightly in the darkness. You, dear listener, have reached the Hidden Citadel.
Hey, welcome to the one and only Hidden Citadel. In fact, it's so hidden, only those with great discernment can find it. Right, Greg?
That's true. It's not hidden to us.
Yeah, it's not hidden to us because we reside there.
That's right.
And you should too. Today, we're going to be talking about something near and dear to our heart. It was so near and dear that we actually lost the original 2 episodes that we recorded about it from a hard drive crash, but that's okay.
It was stolen. It shows the value of it when something is stolen.
That's it. It was stolen away. Today we're going to be talking about 3 interesting, mysterious manuscripts. We're going to talk about the Voynich Manuscript.
Boom.
We're going to talk about the Book of Kells.
Boom.
And we're going to talk about the Codex Gigas, also known as the Devil's Codex.
That's right.
And I was thinking about this, Greg. I think what we need to do is we need to write, because we ended TOB on a cliffhanger.
Yes, we did.
And if you don't know about TOB, you can go buy our book, TOB, at Amazon. Just look our names up. Here's the thing. It ended on, I'm spoiling it for those who haven't read it, it does end on a cliffhanger.
It does.
And I think what we should do instead of writing a sequel is we should just write the conclusion of how it resolves, and then we should write it in a coded language like the Voynich code, and then subscribers can somehow win a copy of it, and then if they can translate it, then they'll know how the story ends.
That's slick. I like that. Really slick. Because, well, we can't tell why, but, you know, there's some language involved. There's important language kinds of things involved in TOB.
That's
Wink.
right.
Wink, wink.
Wink, wink. You got to read the book. It was a labor of love.
It was. It was a lot of Saturdays.
Anyway, let's talk about. I guess we start with the Voynich Manuscript.
Yeah.
The Voynich Manuscript is the weirdest book I've ever seen. It has lots of strange pictures that look like it might be some sort of an herbal or something, but it seems to be related to feminine issues, and there's also astrological stuff in it. I don't know what, and yet nobody can read and there's like so many characters in it that they're like, there's too many characters to where this can't possibly be an actual language.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, I'm sure there's books of absurdity. There's probably books that people who are schizophrenic have written and drawings and all kinds of stuff. But this, you can see there is real intention here, and there's no reason to believe that whoever is the person who wrote it, didn't have meaning behind. They're very consistent forms, and you know, I think they're called semiotics, like little signs and stuff that make up whatever the language is. So it's not intended to confuse. It's intended to inform. We just don't know what that is. And you're right. The drawings are bizarre. They look like there's a writer for Mad Magazine way back named Sergio Aragonés.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And it looks like the female forms look like something he drew. And
I know. Gru the Wanderer.
And it's so interesting the way that you're looking at this thing, and it's not been able to be, they haven't figured out. I think they've put it through all kinds of software, all kinds of everything, trying to figure out, like, what is this that's on, and I think you and I have speculated all kinds of things. It just seems like if there's like an overlay that you could put over, and
exactly,
almost like
maybe like your 3D glasses,
3D glasses, like, and then
pop out,
and then what if it's not even a language? What if it's it's more of
could
like
be numbers,
or map or something.
yeah, or something,
something that's
or ones and zeros or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's really strange. There are a lot of people out there who have said, "Oh yeah, we figured out how to crack the code and it's in Latin," or "We figured out how to crack it and it's in Turkish," or something. But every time they do that, other scholars come along and say, "No, that's not the case." Here's what we do know about it. We do know that the manuscript paper parchment dates to the mid to early 1400s.
Mm-hmm.
So we do know that it's not like a modern, like Voynich didn't create this.
No.
We also have a paper trail that puts it all the way back to one of the early Holy Roman emperors,
Mm-hmm.
and he had it in his collection, and he never could decipher it, and none of his people could.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of people who've been trying to figure this thing out for a long time. But we do know that coded manuscripts are not unusual when it comes to the medical field,
Mm-hmm.
or to science manuals of the day, because it was illegal sometimes to publish those things.
Oh, that's interesting.
So like Leonardo da Vinci, a lot of times wrote his stuff in code or in reverse writing, so that the casual person couldn't just read it. Because some of the things Da Vinci was doing was illegal. He would actually, well, number one, he hired a lot of prostitutes to draw pictures of. And the hiring of prostitutes was frowned on.
Mm-hmm.
But what really was a problem was he would dig up dead bodies, or he would show up at the morgue and do dissections. And that was really considered necromancy at the time, and he could have been executed for it. But that was how he came up with the workings of stuff. He apparently recently, I say within the last 20 some years, they have found that the heart circulates in I think it's a clockwise pattern when the blood swirls out of the thing, out of the aorta. But Da Vinci knew that. And somehow he wrote in one of his books that the blood rotates in a swirling pattern as it drains out of the aorta.
Unless you're in Australia.
Unless you're in Australia, then it goes the other way. But nobody knew that, until he came along, and then they still didn't know it, because it wasn't widely available until some doctor figured it out.
Yeah.
With modern technology. But he deduced it from drawing the heart and the way that the heart worked. He did some of the most amazing anatomical drawings, and it's really too bad that the Voynich person wasn't as good of an artist as Da Vinci.
No.
But what we do know is that it looks as if somebody drew the pictures, and then somebody's 10-year-old went in and painted it.
Who may not have had visual impairment.
Yeah, because it's a mess.
It is funny though. Like when you see an image that requires 3D glasses, it looks like here's the image, and then someone painted it wrong, like with the blue and the red. It's like besmirched, like a Rorschach thing. You're going,
and that's what it looks like.
Yeah, but all right. So here's the thing though. Like in psychology, when you are publishing something, if you are writing something, if you are creating an expression, if you are making an artistic statement, if you're recording any sort of output, there is a function to it. You're doing it for yourself or for somebody else. Whoever did the Voynich went to great lengths to try to inform us of something. It's not a piece of art; it's a piece of information. The only thing is we just don't know what it is.
Yeah, some of the plants in the Voynich, some herbalists and botanists have claimed that they represent plants that are related to American species of plants. Other people have said that, I read that over 600 plants have gone extinct from the 1400s until now in the area of Europe where the Voynich manuscript originated.
Wow.
And so if that's the case, these could have been medicinal plants that people used a lot at the time that don't exist anymore because they all got used up and they're all gone. And that's why some of the plants are almost impossible to identify because we don't know what those plants look like.
Wow, you don't make a good plot if like these plants were responsible for a greater amount of knowledge, health, understanding, and that sort of thing, and some external Nephilim Elohim species came in and wiped them out.
Yeah.
But for whoever wrote this down to preserve the knowledge that we might at some point be able to resurrect these plants, and it would be the key to having
health and goodness
and just a better understanding. What if
what if they have a seed bank somewhere with all these seeds preserved in ice? And the Voynich guy was responsible for it. I don't know.
That's kind of cool. Yeah.
I am a little weirded out by all the naked women bathing in the intestine-looking things.
Again, Mad Magazine. It's not unusual.
Right.
If it's Mad Magazine, it wouldn't be unusual.
Right. Well, and the other thing, too, that people don't often talk about is the idea, I forget what it's called. There's a comedic drawing that monks used to do, and they would make funny little drawings in the illuminations of manuscripts. Like they would have like snails with a rabbit with an armor on it, or monkeys fighting each other with swords, or they would do all sorts of crazy little things like that if they could get away with it in the manuscript.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder if some of the Voynich isn't a little bit of the continuation of that, because we're not too far removed from that time period, you know? I don't know. But that kind of brings us to the Book of Kells.
Yes.
Because we're talking about a manuscript that was one of the earlier versions of an illuminated text. And it's a mystery because we don't know where it came from. There's speculation that it came from a certain island in near Scotland, and then it was brought to Kells in Ireland and kept there forever. And now it's at Trinity College in Dublin. And you've actually seen it, right?
I have. It was in the Book of Matthew. It was open to the Book of Matthew. Yeah.
I wanted to go see it when I was over there, and they had a protest, and they had locked off the exhibit, and we couldn't get in there. And I told my daughter, I was like, you guys really need to go see it before, if you guys think about moving back to the States, you need to go see it before, you move, because that's one of those things that... And I mean, the thing is, they don't live that far from there. They could go every single day and see it. They change it, like, I think it's a daily thing that they change the page.
Yeah.
It's like, I'd love to go. I'd love to spend a month there and just go every day and see...
Right.
That'd be so cool.
It is. I mean, we've talked about we got to do a thing on Ireland again. But that
I know we could do like 20 episodes on Ireland.
So much, but like it's when you just think about just the amount of work that went into that and how comprehensive it is, and that it's just it's got its own beauty to it. And when you think about the preservation of the text and whoever put it together, it makes you feel like you should be doing more in your life. Like it's like
well, I will say, like, that's the beautiful thing about the abbeys of the time. I really loved that show Cadfile. Did you ever watch that show back in the 90s? If you get BritBox or something, you can watch it on BritBox. And Cadfile is this show with Derek Jacobi, and he plays this monk who is an herbalist, but he used to be he was a crusader in one of I think the first crusade. And when he came back from the war, he decided he was going to dedicate his life to try to help people rather than kill people.
Oh, that's
and
good.
So, and the lady that wrote the Cadfile books, they all take place pretty much in Shrewsbury, which is this place on the edge of England and Wales. And Cadfael is a Welsh person, but he ends up living in England in the Abbey. And he one of the tropes of Cadfael is every time somebody dies, he finds some herb on them that is the way to unlock the clue to the mystery. And so he'll say, "Oh, this is, cloves foot or something, and it only grows in this one area over here." And so they go over there and they find the murder weapon or something,
Yeah, yeah.
But what I love about it is it was simple. An abbey is such a beautiful thing because it was a farm, and they raised a lot of crops that sometimes would help not just the monks but help the whole town get through the winter. They were a place of higher education, so if anybody wanted to learn, they could go to the abbey, and as long as they were going to abide by the rules and help, farm and do the things that the monks did, they could go there and learn, which part of that was learning how to read and write, and part of the reading and writing was making of these manuscripts. But what's really interesting, I'm going to divert from Cadfael for a minute, is not everybody who was a scribe was actually literate. So back in the day, yeah, a lot of the writing was actually just copying from another thing, and that's why a lot of these scribes would come up with these funny little things in the margins. I think they were just called marginals. But they would come up with these funny little things to put in the margins because they were bored. And they didn't know what they were copying. They were just reproducing. They were like a human, Xerox machine.
Yeah.
Like a Xerox machine is illiterate too.
Yeah, it is.
And so these guys were like that, and they didn't know what they were, so they would just copy it exactly the way it was supposed to. And one of the main ways that abbeys made money were people would say, "I want to buy this book that was written by this new doctor so-and-so, and Bob has a copy of it." So you didn't go to your local bookstore and buy a copy of that book. What you did is you took Bob's book, you borrowed it, took it to the abbey, paid the monks to transcribe it, and they would make you a copy. You would give Bob his copy back, and now you had another copy of the book that you had wanted a copy of.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the ways they made their money. Another way that they made their money was... or another thing that they were supposed to do is they were a church. And so they would bury people, marry people, do all the things that the church was supposed to do.
Scary people.
And it's like, yeah. The whole thing is like, I just think it's a cool thing that in modern days we've lost.
Yeah.
But there are elements of it that we could bring back that would be really beneficial to our society. And that's why I just loved the Cadfael show, because it showed all of that. But you learn a lot about the whole manuscript process, and the Book of Kells was certainly one of the original ones in that. And the other thing that's interesting about the Book of Kells is there are painting techniques that are involved that we have no idea how they painted it.
Really?
Like the details are so fine that we're like, you can't do that with a quill pen. So what did they use? Like there's like one part where I saw a picture of a fish where the scales are so intricate and they're sparkly, like they have glitter on them. And it's like, how did they paint glitter? Nobody knows. It's like you couldn't do it with a brush because a brush is too big.
Yeah.
You couldn't do it with a quill because it's too big. It's like the kind of thing that you'd have to do with like a toothpick or something.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's like little mysteries like that, are all around the Book of Kells, and they just don't really know all the details of it.
And the marveling thing, I think, is that it's a work that, when we think of, you always think that, as technology increases, so does its ability to be efficient, accurate, not supernatural, but it elevates itself higher than what it has been in previous generations. But then you look at some of these works and you go, we're not even close to that. That was done, we still can't replicate.
There are techniques that Da Vinci did Da Vinci's one of my heroes. On my wall, I have a Da Vinci poster of a lot of the things that he created. One of the things about Da Vinci that blew me away is that he was an accomplished musician, and that's how he made most of his money until he got hired to be a weapons designer, you know? And it's like, but the thing about Da Vinci is there are things that he designed that we have no idea how he figured it out. Like there's a painting he did of this valley that the only way it looks like that is if you're in the air looking at it.
What?
Yeah, and so they're like, maybe he got his little airplane to work, or one of his flying machines that he designed.
Yeah.
Maybe he figured out a way and he actually built it and it actually worked. But what we do know about Da Vinci is we only have about, I think it's like 30 or 40% of what he actually produced, that there was actually like somehow a big chunk of Da Vinci's work has been lost. And so we'll never know, you know?
Yeah.
Like I think there was a fire or something that destroyed a lot of his original manuscripts. And so it's like, if he built a flying machine, we don't know, but we do have that painting that could only have been made if he flew.
Yeah.
You know?
That's
so it's like,
amazing.
It's a pretty cool stuff.
Yeah,
you know?
and you know, it seems like he had not only an interest in flying, but he had a lot of detail to show that, you know, it didn't look very speculative. Like it looked like it was a product of trial and error. Probably not that much error, but I mean enough. There's enough.
Well, and all the detail
Not technology, but enough. It. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, he would think of things like a screw. A screw can actually move water through a trough, so a screw could move air. Yeah. And so one of his early flying designs was a flying screw. Mm-hmm. It's like, you know, who would have thought of that other than somebody like Da Vinci? And then he had a glider that was based off of the way birds' wings work, you know, and it's just, I mean, the guy was so fascinating, everything about him, but it's a mystery, and that brings us to our final manuscript, which is the Codex Gigas. Yeah. And basically the story behind the Codex Gigas is that Herman the monk was basically being punished for doing something evil, and we don't know what, but he does list his sins in the Codex, and it's like he decided, I'm going to try out every last sin that I can think of, because they're all in there, and he says that he did them all. So it's like, even some really bad stuff that we shouldn't mention on YouTube. But so Herman, he's done all these evil things, and they decided, okay, we're going to wall you up in a wall alive, and that's going to be your punishment for this. So as they're putting him in the wall and the bricklayers are coming in and they're bricking up the wall, he's begging the abbot, give me another chance, give me another chance. And the abbot basically is teasing him, and he says, fine, if you can write a book in one night that contains all of the world's in wisdom, then we won't wall you up in this wall. And he says, okay, I can do that. And they're like, really? And he's like, yeah, I just need this much manuscript paper to do it. And they're like, okay. So they put him in a locked room. They brought him a bunch of quills and ink and a stack of parchment. And what's weird is they know that this parchment all dates to the same time period, and that it was all, you know, made by the same methods, you know, so they can tell that this isn't like parchment that was made over a long period of time. This all was done like right at the same time. Then the other thing they know from the Codex is everything that's written in it was all written in the same time by the same person. And the other thing is there are absolutely no mistakes in the Codex either. And so this guy, basically, they're like, well, how did he do it? And so he said in his own testimony that he had to make a deal with the devil.
Mhm.
This is the first deal with the devil story.
Yeah.
And he makes a deal with the devil, and the devil shows up and he says, okay, I can do this. So they include the New Testament, the Old Testament, and we're talking about with the Apocrypha.
Yeah.
They also have the complete works of Josephus, which is what, like 7 books or something like that.
Yeah.
It's got a couple medical treatises. It's got the Rule of Saint Benedict, and like
Book
3 or 4
is
or
Enoch?
5.
Is Enoch in that too?
I don't think it has Enoch in there, but it should. It might as well. We'll just say it does.
What's funny is the deal with the devil. It's like, I can't even make a comparison for that, but it's like the last book I think would, the last book that I would think that he'd want in its pure form would be something that
would be the Bible.
Is something as impressive and as evangelistic as the Bible.
Yeah, well, and the other thing about it that's interesting is it's the first iconography of the devil looking like a beast in European history. So normally when they would draw the devil, they would draw him like any other angel, but they might put like a black robe on him or some other colored robe that was different than the other angels, so you knew that it was the devil.
Yep.
But in this one, right in the middle of the book, it's got a big picture, and actually there's several pictures throughout the book of the devil, but it's got a big picture of this demonic-looking creature right next to a picture of what's supposed to be the heavenly city.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it's saying you can go one way or the other. Well, anyway, the legend is that Herman finishes the book with the devil's help, or the devil did it for him or something, and the abbey has to keep its word and say, okay, the abbot says we're not going to wall you up, but you're not allowed to live here anymore and you need to go somewhere else. So he wanders all over and he's feeling miserable because he knows he sold his soul to Satan, and he knows that when his death comes he's going to go straight to hell, and there isn't even purgatory for him. He's pretty convinced that he's done until the Virgin Mary shows up and says, are you contrite? And have you really repented of this evil, horrible thing that you've done? And he's like, yeah, and he's weeping and wailing in misery, and so she absolves him of his sin, and then he dies like later, and he goes right to heaven or something.
So she got her man?
She got her man.
Her man.
So, yeah, her man.
She saved her man.
Her man, yeah. So, good old Herman, he gets, sent to heaven. Here's the thing. I don't know if any of that's true. But what we do know about the book is somebody wrote it all in one shot. Because if a person were to write journals, you would look at their handwriting when they were young, and then you would compare it with their handwriting when they're old, and it would change over time.
Yeah.
The other thing we know about it is he writes with unusual letter choices that are peculiar to just the Codex Gigas. Like the G's are peculiar to Herman.
Yeah.
Nobody else uses G's like that in Ionical or whatever the heck that script is called. The changing of age would even introduce certain things, like even if you wrote exactly the way, like you were a trained artist and a trained scribe, by the time you were older, your hand would start to shake. And so you would have like little minor fluctuations at the end of the book compared to what you started with at the beginning, and none of that is present. So my thinking on the matter is this. I think Herman was an incredibly trained scribe.
Yeah.
I'm thinking he must have been about 30 when he started the manuscript. They say that it would have taken literally 30 years to complete the manuscript, not counting the illustrations.
If you wrote, what is it? If you wrote every day for like 10 hours?
Every single day, all day long.
No.
And I'm like, I don't know how it's possible. I'm just trying to think of a possible thing. If he was such a good artist that he had his technique down and he could do it faster than everybody else, But they were saying this part of that whole thing about writing 10 hours a day was including you have to cut your nibs and you have to fix your ink and you have to do that kind of stuff.
Or eat.
And that's going to take time, and you got to eat. And that's going to take time, and it's like you got to factor all that stuff in, and everybody's like, I don't know how anybody could have produced this thing. It's flawless. And it literally should have, like, if you add the drawings, it should take a person about 60 years probably to do this at a normal pace if you just, were not producing 10 pages a day or 10 hours a day or whatever the estimate was. And it's like nobody 60 years working on something is going to have the same handwriting.
That's fascinating.
It's not going to look like that.
Now, but you couldn't have someone who is or several people who are so skilled at replicating. They couldn't all just be working just to, this is the way we're going to.
No, because they don't. There are techniques that they're not going to look the same. Like if you have, like let's say you make a line and the way you make your E is to draw the middle line slightly longer. The next guy might not know to draw his line slightly longer like that, and every single E in the book looks exactly the same.
No.
It's little things like that. And here's the thing, though. This gets into our whole idea of the fairies and how when the fairies take somebody away, they could be gone for 30, 50, 100 years, and when they're brought back, they think they've only been away for a night.
Wow.
But somehow time stopped. Moses, when he went up on the mountain to meet with God, he's gone for 40 days. He comes down from the mountain, throws a fit, breaks the 10 Commandments, grinds up the golden calf, and there's nowhere that it says that he eats in that time period.
Yeah.
And then he goes back up on the mountain and he fasts again for another 40 days. Now, I don't know about you, but I've fasted for 7 days and I thought I was going to die.
Yeah.
It's like I can't imagine fasting for 80 days.
Yeah.
The longest fast that we know of is this guy in Scotland weighed 350 some pounds or 400 pounds, and he fasted for a whole year, but he did it by being incredibly hydrated and given lots of vitamins to help him get through this fasting period. Moses didn't have that. It was almost as if time just stopped, and it's like we hear about like the guy that in Ireland that he rode, the fairies took him, he rode his horse. When he came back, his companions got off their horses before they were supposed to, and they immediately turned to dust because he had been gone 300 years. Or the child ballad of Thomas the Rhymer, where he comes back and all of his family is old and dead because he's been away with the fairies for so long. And so I'm like, well, if you could go into fairyland and you could work on this for 60 years, and you think, well, I've only been working on this, but I'm getting a lot done. It's only been a week, and then all of a sudden, and it's kind of like this. Okay, do you remember when I was working on the smidge tale or the smidge hunt?
Yeah.
Well, I lived in Nyack, and I lived right on the Hudson. I don't think you ever maybe you came to my apartment one time, but I lived right on the Hudson, and my window overlooked the Hudson River. And there were times when I would be working on the paintings for that story that never got published. Maybe if I could find them again, maybe I could publish it someday. But anyway, the point was I would be working on those paintings, and I would start, it would be like a Saturday, and I'm like, 8 in the morning, and I'll just start working. And then the next thing I notice, it's like, wait a minute, it's starting to get dark out, and I'm like, oh gosh, it's 6 o'clock at night. And I didn't even realize that I don't even remember spending that much time working on the painting. But there is something about creating artwork that you can completely lose track of time. And now if this guy, Herman, was somehow able to go into a trance and hyper focus like that and just really crank through stuff, maybe it is possible that he could produce stuff a lot quicker than people normally can.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the idea that, how was creation? What was creation? Was creation over a period of time? Was time created? Was when let the birds of the air fill? Let when that was done, was that instantaneous? Because that was, um, uh, it was the occurrence of an abundant. If it was instantaneous, an occurrence of abundance in a relatively short time, the time it takes just to be able to speak something into existence. So that kind of like quantum, or that kind of physics, or that kind of the law there, whatever. If it applied to Christ, and if we are in Christ and are like Christ, or have, when he says all this and more, is that possible that some of those elements are somehow for Christ's purpose then put within us,
Yeah,
or
and
having
also
access to it?
that brings up another interesting thing. If we were to use our own reckoning, Jesus was only in the tomb for a day
Yeah.
and change. But they said he's going to be in the tomb for 3 days, which means scholars say, well, he was put in the tomb at the end of one day. He was in the tomb all the day the next day, and he was partially in the tomb in the morning of the other day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they justify it. But what if it's more than that? What if he was in the tomb for 3 days in the spiritual realm, but it only was a day or something in our realm? I mean, there is something weird about time and the unseen realm. And I don't understand it, and I don't know how to reconcile it, but it's weird.
Well, you have the.
Go
Well,
ahead.
I mean, is there kind of a mathematical, kind of equation that the numbers that we are subject to are not the same numbers that a heavenly being or God is subject to? Yes, one day is like 1,000 years. 1,000 years, like you have. I don't.
Yeah.
You could say, well, that's kind of just it's a metaphor of such. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's an equation of sort that what we regard as this is actually, it's almost like the way the dog years are. That it's like one.
Yeah.
This is actually 77 or whatever.
Well, I like where you were going with the quantum thing too, because they know that they can observe a particle, like a quark, that is in one place, and then all of a sudden it's in another place, but it's also in the same place, and they behave very strangely like that.
Yep.
And it's like what Paul said, that and how Paul even got this idea is amazing.
Yeah.
That he said, here we are on earth, but we're also seated in the heavenly realms.
Yeah.
What person of his day and age would say something that bizarre unless they had seen it in a vision or something? But now, here we are in the 21st century. I don't think I doubt that he did. I think he was like, this is something I observed and it's weird. And I'm just going to say it how I saw it. And I think that's what scientists are doing with these quarks. They're looking at this and they're like, we're just calling it how we see it, but we don't get it. I've never heard any scientist explain how it works yet.
Up, down, strange charm, top, bottom. Aren't they? That's the names of the quarks? Something like that.
Yeah, and it's like, who knows how they work, All right, folks, we're going to wrap this one up. You have been listening to the Hidden Citadel podcast. I would love it if you would go buy our book, The Encyclopedia of Strange Crap. And what would even be better is if you would also buy one of our t-shirts and wear it while you're reading the book out in public so that people can see, that you are a fan of the Hidden Citadel, or at least that you are part of it, and maybe they can come into the Hidden Citadel too, and we will embrace them.
It's a double blessing. You want the double blessing. You want the t-shirt and you want the book. Because if you have that...
Yeah, and then you're good. And if you buy the
you're good.
TOB, if you buy TOB, then it's a triple blessing.
It is.
And when volume 2 of the Encyclopedia of Weird Crap comes out, it's like the four-fold blessing that you'll be eternally blessed forever. And your bathroom will be too, because as your books sit in the bathroom, everybody else that visits you will be blessed as well.
It's like it's like really good origami. It's fourfold blessing. If you have fourfold.
All right, folks, you've heard it here. Stay in the Citadel.
Night is coming.
God bless you.
The watchman replies, morning is coming, but night will soon return.